Hey everybody, thanks for coming back and hanging out with Mr. Bauer today. It's an early day in May and I wanted to show you around the garden, and I noticed that I got a few math problems in here too, so come along, we'll take a look and we'll show you around. Okay, first of all, in here, this bed is just full of weeds, so I'm not done yet. I replanted some strawberries over here. I just had them extra. They were what are called runners, and I needed to put them somewhere. They probably won't be there for a really long time, but this bed is not done at all. All right, if you come over to this next bed, this is half strawberries and half asparagus, and you can see these white flowers down here. If you look really closely, those will turn into strawberries. So this bed is always planted. Strawberries, that's a plant that keeps growing back, and then asparagus is a plant that keeps growing back too. If you can get in here, you might be able to see just a few little shoots. Let's see, how about right here? Here's one right here. This is a little asparagus shoot, just a little baby. This one right here, this is an asparagus shoot. Might be kind of hard to see. Here's another little teeny tiny one, and another one right here. So there are a few. This bed is done. The good news is asparagus will grow for like the next 30 years, so I never have to plant that again. So that's good stuff. Next bed over here, this is also not planted. I'm going to put a whole bunch of beans here. I'm probably going to get to that today or tomorrow. So except for the strawberries and the asparagus, the three beds I've shown you already are not done yet. Okay, next up is we've got our potato bed, and if you watched a video back in March, this potato bed is all planted. Over here we've got red potatoes, and over here we've got yellow potatoes, and most of this is popping up. You see we've got this little plant over here, even right here, so these are all coming up. And then the yellow ones, they're still waiting for them to come up, but there are potatoes here. This bed is done. All right, next up over here, we've got, these are all peas, and then we've got some carrots and some radishes and some lettuce. So this is all planted. I'm just waiting for all of these seeds to come up. So this bed is fully planted. Next up in this bed I have planted tomato cages. So these cages will turn into tomatoes, right?
No.
No, I'm just kidding. So this bed is kind of my storage right now, just keeping things up and out of the way. Not done at all. So yeah, we just got more work over here. Okay, next up, when I cook with a lot of onions, so this entire bed is going to be full of onions. It's not fully planted, but you see I do have a lot planted. I just still have some that, I just ran out, so I got to keep planting a little bit more. So not fully done here, but getting close. And then right over here, this is going to be my cucumber bed. I'll have cucumbers for slicing, cucumbers for pickling. I'm going to have thick cucumbers and short cucumbers. So there are going to be 4 kinds of cucumbers here. The only section I don't have planted is this 4th right here. So I've got over here, those are going to be these are going to be pickling cucumbers. Over here are going to be my big chompers, and over here are going to be some little or slicing cucumbers. So I've got 3 out of 4, 3/4 of that bed planted. Then next up, out of this bed is going to be my melons, but I haven't planted any melons yet, so this bed is not done yet either. Now, last one I want to show you, this is probably my favorite, this is the newest one, is I've got all sorts of strawberries down here. I've got 3 types of strawberries. These the ones that we're close to, they like to make strawberries right away in June. And then the ones in the middle like to make strawberries in the middle of June, and the strawberries there like to make strawberries at the end of June. So my hope is that I have plenty of strawberries, not this year because they're new plants, but next year and every year for the next long while. So I'm looking forward to that. So this bed is completely planted. So I still got some work to do, and we'll take you inside and I'll show you everything that still needs to be done, and we'll use some fractions to understand our learning as well. So let's take it on inside.
All right, now before we answer some of those questions, I wanted to do a little warm up with adding and subtracting some fractions that have the same denominator. So what I did over here is I drew to show our little bar diagram to show us what the whole piece would be. So since we're dealing with tenths in this first problem, you'll see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Again, with fractions, we want to make sure that all of these pieces are the exact size. Now, since I drew that freehand, I tried to get them as exact as possible. So let's take a look here. The first problem, we have 2 tenths, and that would be this section right here. That's 2 tenths. And then we want to add 5 tenths more. So our answer should be bigger. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have 5 tenths. And when we add those together, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 pieces out of the 10 total. Now we never want to add the denominator because we didn't change these tenths into 20ths. We still kept them at 10. So we had 2 plus 5 more is 7 tenths. All right, let's take a look at another one here. 1/4 plus 1/4. So let's see, there's 1/4. That's this one here, 1/4. We add another one, and that is also 1/4. And we add those together, and we are going to have 2/4. Again, we stuck with fourths the whole time. And so we're going to add our numerator. We have 1 and 1 is 2. If you remember from equivalent fractions, though, if you look at this, we have actually filled up exactly half of this. So 2/4 is also the same as 1/2. So 1/2 is filled in. And if you remember, we need 2 fewer pieces to fill in this whole thing. And so we have twice as few. So we get 1/2 out of that. So 1/2 or 2/4. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Next one is 7/9 minus 2/9. So we're subtracting in this case. Let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's 7/9. So we got this and this. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7/9. All right, now we're going to take away 2 of those 9ths. We don't want 2 of those. So we'll take away this one here, and we'll take away this one here. And how many 9ths do we have left? You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of the 9. So 7/9 minus 2/9 is 5/9. Okay, you can start to see that adding and subtracting fractions when the denominator is the same is pretty much like regular subtraction that you did back in kindergarten and first grade. Let's take a look at the next one. We have 6/8. So here we go. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that is 6/8. And we want to subtract 4/8. So we started with 1, 8, 2 8s, 3 8s, 4 8s, 5 8s, and 6 8s. Let's get rid of 4 of them. That's 1 8, 2 8s, 3 8s, and 4 8s. And we are left with 2 out of the 8. Now you might notice those are both even numbers, so we can reduce that fraction. We can simplify. So what we can do here is we had a group of 2 8s. Here's another group of 2 8s we didn't use. Here's another group of 2 8s we didn't use. And here's another group of 2 8s that we didn't use. You can see that we used 1 out of those 4. We made the pieces twice as big, so we needed only half of them. So 2 8s is the same as 1/4. Alrighty, what happens if we've got multiple numbers? Well, it's pretty much the same thing. So we've got 4/5. And so here we have 4/5. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4/5. And then we add the next fifth. That's this one right here, 1/5. Now this is a little bit different. We've got 1/5 more. So we had our 1 whole piece. Now we're going to need to make a little bit more. So this is actually going to be a little bit more than 1, and we're getting into mixed numbers and improper fractions, which we're not going to focus on today, but we will get into that a little bit later. So we have 1/5. So we've got 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5, and then 5/5, and then our next 6/5. So our numerator is bigger than our denominator. So we have an improper fraction, which means it's more than 1. Now, I'm not going to take you through this today step by step, but another way to write this mixed number would be 1 and 1/5. And you can see that because we have 1 whole and then another 5th. But that's for another day. All right, last warm up here, we have 8/12. So there's 8/12. Let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8/12. That's 8 out of 12. And now we need to take away 4/12. So let's see. 1/12, 2/12, 3/12, 4/12, 5/12, 6/12, 7/12, 8/12. We're going to get rid of 4 of them. 1/12, 2/12, 3/12, 4/12. And now we need to get rid of 3/12. That's 1/12, 2/12, 3/12. And so we've got 8/12, took away 4/12, took away 3/12, and now we have a total of just this one, just 1/12. And since we're down to 1, that's what we call a unit fraction. We can't reduce that anymore. All right, and again, if you follow a pattern, 8 minus 4 is 4, minus 3 is 1 more. So there you go. That's a little bit of a review from a couple different standpoints of how we can do that. Now let's take a look at our garden problems. Alrighty, so this is a quick drawing of what my garden looked like. Now for today, I know that the strawberry bed's much larger, but I'm going to count this as one bed and then all of these others as their own unique beds too. Okay, so we had our weeds, our partially filled onions, asparagus and strawberries, peas, lettuce, radishes, and carrots. This one we had cucumbers, except for this section. We had weeds, potatoes, and weeds. All right, so we'll take a look at our first question here. It says, Mr. Bauer has 10 beds in his garden. You see we've got 3 by 3, which is 9 plus 1 more. So how many are completely planted? Show your answer using fractions. All right, well, I didn't plant those weeds and I didn't plant those weeds. The onions are not totally filled, but this one is. All right, so our asparagus and our strawberries. So that's 1 out of 10. That is filled. Our peas and our radishes and carrots and lettuce, that is totally filled. So I've got 1/10 and I've got another 1/10 that are filled in. Our cucumbers are almost filled, but I've got that section. Still waiting for those in the mail. Can't wait till they come. The weeds, nope. Potatoes are all filled, so that's another 1 out of 10. 1 out of 10. And then I've got more weeds here where the melons will go, so that doesn't count. And then last, I've got my strawberries. So I have 4 beds, or 1/10 plus 1/10 plus 1/10 plus 1/10. And when I add those all together, I get 4/10. Now, if you want to reduce that, 4 can be divided by 2, and 10 can be divided by 2 to make it simpler. So I could say that 2/5 of my garden is planted. And if you remember from the other video, I don't even have half of, it's close to half, but it's under half. Half of 5 would be 2.5. So 2 is less than 2.5, which means I have less than half of my garden planted. I've still got some work to do, but that's okay. Because remember, those onions are close and those cucumbers are close. So I'm not going to get too down on myself. I know a lot of people that garden like to work really, really hard, and then if it doesn't turn out, well, gardening's a big project. So I'm not going to be downtrodden. It will get planted, and I guess the optimistic view is I'm halfway done. So, all right, I have 2/5 of my garden totally planted, but now I've got a different question for you. What fraction of the garden beds are partially or fully planted? So that's a little bit different. So let's take a look here. We've got my fully planted beds, which we just figured out was 4 out of 10. And then our partially planted beds. All right, so that would include the onions, and that would include the cucumbers. And then I've still got weeds. So now I have 4/10 partially planted and 2/10 partially planted. So I can add those together because I want to know how many have something planted in them that aren't just weeds. So I got 4/10 plus 2/10, and that's going to give us 6/10. Now, since these are both even numbers, they're both composite, we can divide these by 2, which would be 3/5. Now, I know 3/5, 3 is more than 2.5, so that means that I actually have more than half of my garden beds at least started. So that's a little bit more positive way of looking at that. So that's good stuff. All right. So next question here. It says, what fraction of Mr. Bauer's garden still needs to be planted? So if I had 10 beds, and I had 10 out of 10 that were planted, that would mean my whole garden is still full. But I don't have that. I have 4 out of 10 that are completely done. So I'm going to take those 10 tenths and I'm going to subtract those 4 that I still need to be planted, or that have been planted. And I've got 10 tenths minus 4 tenths is 6 tenths. And so we'd say 6 tenths still need to be completed. And again, if you remember, 6 and 10 are both even, so 6 tenths, we could divide those by 2, and we'd also say another way is 3/5 of my beds still need to be planted. So we're still working, and that's okay. All right, last one's a bonus question here, a little bit harder. It says, if one bed takes a half hour to prepare and plant, how much time will Mr. Bauer need to finish planting his whole garden? Okay, so a little bit trickier here, and we're going to get into multiplying fractions next time. So let's see here. We have 6 beds out of 10, and each one takes 30 minutes. So what I can do is I could say one bed would be 30 minutes, and 6 beds would just be 6 times bigger. So we could take 30 times 6 and we'd get 180 minutes. Now that's a lot of minutes. It's so big that I want to reuse that a little bit. Let's see, 180 minutes. I know that there are 60 minutes in an hour. So I could take 180 divided by 60, and I know that 60 times 3 is 180. So I converted those into hours. So I still have 3 hours of work I have to do. So now you got a little practice adding and subtracting fractions, and I got to let you go. Thanks for hanging out with Mr. Bauer. Looks like I still have 3 hours worth of gardening left to do. So thanks for hanging out with me, and we will see you next time.